Russian researchers in the late 1940s kept 5 people awake for 15 days using an experimental gas-based stimulant. They were kept in a sealed environment to carefully monitor their oxygen intake so the gas didn't kill them, since it was toxic in high concentrations. This was before closed-circuit cameras, so they only had microphones and 5-inch thick glass porthole-sized windows in the chambers to monitor them. The chamber was stocked with books, cots to sleep on, but no bedding, running water and toilets, and enough dried food to last them all over a month. The subjects were political prisoners deemed enemies of the state during World War II. Everything was fine for the first 5 days. The subjects hardly complained, having been promised, falsely, that they would be freed if they submitted to the test and did not sleep for 30 days. Their conversations and activities were monitored, and it was noted that they continued to talk about increasingly traumatic incidents in their past, and the general tone of their conversation took a darker aspect after the 4-day mark. After 5 days, they started to complain about the circumstances and events that led them to where they were and demonstrated severe paranoia. They stopped talking to each other and began alternatively whispering to their microphones and one-way mirrored portholes. Oddly, they all seemed to think they could win the trust of the experimenters by turning over their comrades, the other subjects, in captivity with them. At first, the researchers suspected this was the effect of the gas itself. After 9 days, the first of them began to start screaming. He ran the length of the chamber repeatedly, yelling at the top of his lungs for 3 straight hours. He continued attempting to scream, but was only able to produce occasional squeaks. The researchers thought that he had physically torn his vocal cords. The most surprising thing about the behavior is how the other captives reacted to it, or rather, didn't react to it. They continued whispering to the microphones until the second of the captives starts to scream. The 2 non-screaming captives took the books apart, smearing page after page with their own feces, and pasted them calmly over the glass portholes. They screamed, promptly stopped. So did the whispering to the microphones. After 3 more days passed, the researchers checked the microphones hourly to make sure they were working, since they thought it was impossible that no sound could be coming from 5 people inside. The oxygen consumption in the chamber indicated that all 5 must still be alive. In fact, this was the amount of oxygen 5 people would consume at a very heavy level strenuous exercise. On the morning of the 14th day, the researchers did something they thought they would not get a reaction from the captives. They used the intercom instead of the chamber, hoping to provoke a response from the captives. They were afraid were either dead or vegetables. They announced, "We are opening the chamber to test the microphones. Step away from the door and lie flat on the floor or you will be shot. Compliance will earn one of you your imminent freedom." To their surprise, they heard a single phrase in a calm voice response: "We no longer want to be freed." Debate broke among the researchers and the military forces funding the research. Unable to provoke any more response using the intercom, it was finally decided to open the chamber at midnight on the 15th day. The chamber was flushed out the stimulant gas and filled with fresh air, and immediately voices from the microphone began to object. 3 voices began begging, as if pleading for the life of loved ones, to turn the gas back on. The chamber was opened and soldiers sent in to retrieve the test subjects. They began to scream louder than ever, and so did the soldiers when they saw what was inside. 4 of the 5 subjects were still alive, although no one could rightly call the state of any of them in life. The food rations past 5 have not been so much as touched. There were chunks of meat from the dead test subject's thighs and chest stuffed into the drain in the center of the chamber, blocking the drain and allowing 4 inches of water to accumulate on the floor. Preciously, how much of the water in the floor was blood was never determined. All 4 surviving test subjects also had large portions of muscle and skin torn from their bodies. The destruction of flesh and exposed bone on their fingertips indicated that the wounds were inflicted by hand, not with teeth, as the researchers initially thought. Closer examinations of the position and angles of the wounds indicated that most if not all of them were self-inflicted. The abdominal organs below the rib cage of all 4 test subjects have been removed, while the heart, lungs, and diaphragm remain in place. The skin and most of the muscles attached to the ribs have all been ripped off, exposing the lung through the rib cage. All the blood vessels and organs remained intact. They had just been taken out and laid on the floor, fanning out and eviscerated, but the living bodies of the test subjects. The digestive tract of all 4 could be seen to be working, digesting food. It quickly became apparent that they were digesting was their own flesh that had been ripped off and eaten over the course of the days. Most of the soldiers were Russian special operatives at the facility, but still many refused to return to the chamber to remove the test subjects. They continued to scream to be left in the chamber and alternately begged and demanded that the gas be turned back on, lest they fell asleep. To everyone's surprise, the test subjects put up a fierce fight in the process of being removed from the chamber. One of the Russian soldiers died from having his throat ripped out. Another was gravely injured by having his testicles ripped off and his artery of his leg severed by one of the subject's teeth. After 5 of the soldiers lost their lives, if you count ones as committed suicide in the weeks following the incident. In the struggle, one of the 4 living subjects had his spleen ruptured and he bled out almost immediately. The medical researchers attempted to sedate him, but this proved impossible. He was injected with more than 5 times the human dose of morphine derivative and still fought like a concerned animal, breaking the ribs and arms of one doctor. When the heart was seen to beat for a full 2 minutes, after he bled out, to the point where there was more air in his vascular system than blood. Even it stopped, he continued to scream and flail for another 3 minutes, struggling to attack anyone in reach. He just repeated the word more over and over, weaker and weaker until he finally fell silent. The surviving 3 test subjects were heavily restrained and moved to the medical facility. The 2 with intact vocal cords continuously begged for the gas demand to be kept awake. The most injured of the 3 was taken to the only surgical operating room that the facility had, in the process of preparing the subject to have his organs placed back within his body. It was found that he was effectively immune to the sedative they had given him to prepare him for surgery. He fought furiously against his restraints when the anesthetic gas brought out to put him under. He managed to tear most of the way through a 4-inch wide leather strap on one wrist, even though the weight of a 200-pound soldier holding that wrist as well. It took only a little more anesthetic than normal to put him under, and the instant his eyelids fluttered closed, his heart stopped. And the autopsy of the test subject that died on the operating table was found that his blood had been triple the normal level of oxygen. The muscles that were still attached to his skeleton were badly torn, and he had 9 broken bones in his struggle to not be subdued. Most of them were from the force his own muscles had exerted on them. The second survivor of the first group of 5 started screaming. His vocal cords destroyed. He was unable to beg or object to surgery, and he only reacted by shaking his head violently in disapproval when the anesthetic gas was brought near him. He shook his head yes when someone suggested reluctantly they tried the surgery without anesthetic. And did not react to the entire 6-hour procedure of replacing his abdominal organs and attempting to cover them with what remained of his skin. The surgeon stated repeatedly that it shouldn't be medically possible for the patient to still be alive. One terrified nurse assisted the surgery stated that she has seen the patient's mouth curl into a smile several times whenever his eyes met hers. The surgery ended, the subject looked at the surgeon and began to wheeze loudly, attempting to talk while struggling. Assuming this must meant drastic importance, the surgeon had a pen and pad fetched so the patient could write his message. It was simple: keep cutting. The other two test subjects were given the same surgery, both without anesthetic as well, although they had been being injected with a paralytic for duration of the operation. The surgeon found it impossible to perform the operation while the patient laughed continuously. Once paralyzed, the subject could only follow the attended researchers with their eyes. The paralytic cleared their system in an abnormally short period of time, and they soon tried to escape their bonds. The moment they could speak, they were again asking for the stimulant gas. The researchers tried to ask him why they had injured themselves, why they ripped out their own guts, and why they wanted to be given the gas again. The only response was given: "I must remain awake." All three subjects' restraints were reinforced, and they were placed back into the chamber awaiting determination as to what should be done with them. The researchers faced the wrath of the military's benefactors of having failed the stated goals of their project, considering euthanizing the surviving subjects. The commanding officer, an ex-KGB, instead saw potential and wanted to see what would happen if they were put back on the gas. The researchers strongly objected, but were overruled. In preparation for being sealed in the chamber again, the subjects were connected to an EEG monitor and had their restraints paddled for a long-term confinement. To everyone's surprise, all three stopped struggling the moment it was let slip. That they were going back on gas. It was obvious at this point all three were putting up a great struggle to stay awake. One of the subjects that could speak was humming loudly and continuously. The mute subject was straining his legs to the leather bonds with all his might, first left, then right, then left again, for something to focus on. The remaining subject was holding his head off his pillow and blinking rapidly. Having been the first to be wired for the EEG, most of the research was monitoring his brain waves in surprise. They were normal for the most time, but sometimes flatlined inexplicably. It looked as if he were repeatedly suffering brain death before returning to normal. As they focused on paper scrolling out the brainwave monitors, only one nurse saw his eyes slip shut at the moment his head hit the pillow. His brainwaves immediately changed to that of deep sleep, then flatlined for the last time as his heart simultaneously stopped. The only remaining subject that could speak started screaming to be sealed in now. His brainwaves showed that some flatlines, as one who had just died from falling asleep. The commander gave the order to seal the chamber with both subjects inside, as well as three researchers. One of the named three, immediately drew his gun and shot the commander point blank between the eyes, then turned the gun to the mute subject and blew his brains out as well. He pointed his gun at the remaining subject. Still restrained to the bed, remaining members of the medical and research team fled the room. "I won't be locked in here with these things. Not with you," he screamed. The man strapped to the table. "What are you?" he demanded. "I must know." The subject smiled. "Have you forgotten so easily?" the subject asked. "We are you. We are the madness that lurks within you, begging to be free at every moment in your deepest animal mind. We are what you hide from in your beds every night. We are what you sedate into silence and paralysis when you go to the nocturnal haven where we cannot thread." The researcher paused, then aimed the subject's heart and fired. The EEG flatlined and the subject weakly choked out. So nearly free. Well, that was my reading on the Russian sleep experiment. Sorry that I stuttered a lot and I got some words wrong here and there that I couldn't really say. I'm not the best when it comes to talking or speaking and whatnot, or reading out loud in that matter. You know, I did this because I thought, well, it'd be something different, something, I wouldn't say fresh on the channel because the Russian sleep experiment is quite old by now. But I don't know. I think the Russian sleep experiment is still, it's pretty okay creepypasta. Just not like the best, obviously. It's quite old, so if you haven't heard it by now, I'll be quite surprised. But it's, creepypasta is not everyone's thing. But, I would like to know what your thoughts on it. You think it's a good creepypasta, a bad one, maybe a first or second one? I don't know. I would like to really know what you guys think of it in the comment section down below. Anyways, if you guys enjoyed, please leave a like, comment, subscribe for more. And if you want me to read another creepypasta, leave one down in the comment section below, and I'll do my best to read it. As I said, I'm not the great at reading, but I'll probably do better next time. To be fair, it's my first time ever actually like reading a creepypasta, if it's let alone reading it out loud. So, I actually had a good time with it. Anyways, I'll see you all later. Peace.